Okay, so you loaded an iRacing session, it loaded up, and instead of seeing a green box here, you see a yellow box that says Calibrate Controls, and you click on Options, or it tries to force you straight into a calibration. It basically has these areas blank because it's for some reason confused about where the devices are that it previously had calibrated. The reason why it can't see them is because when computers start up, they immediately look at every USB device that's connected and the order in which they're connected, and it assigns them a temporary or a virtual address location. And it starts with USB device 0, USB device 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. If you start an iRacing session and it says calibration controls needed, required, you must do a calibration of your controls, the first thing you should do is probably exit out of the session. Don't change anything. Don't click OK on anything. Try to just click cancel, 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 cancel. Quit out of the session and shut it down. Shut down the PC and then check that all the USB ports are correctly in the ports. Maybe just one by one, pull them out, put them back in the exact same place they were in. Check other power switches on devices like your force feedback unit. Make sure that power supply is on. You don't have to worry about the speakers, but just make sure things are connected. And it's crazy to have to do that. It sounds like, why should that ever be a problem? Um, well, the answer is some people have children and grandchildren, and sometimes kids touch things. We all know they do. They never tell you that they do. And so the quickest fix can be shutting the computer down, checking everything is still switched on all the devices where there are power switches, checking all the cables are still connected, and then plug everything back in and then turn the computer back on. And there's a good chance when you get back to the loading a session, everything works fine because Windows and PC sees every USB device, or iRacing sees every USB device in the correct order. Maybe it's like device 0 is your steering, and so it can still see that this is steering. Um, if for some reason that didn't fix it, this is the fix, is to have to go through and calibrate everything again. So starting with steering, it wants us to turn the steering wheel physically all the way until you see that the raw value here went down to 0, and that's basically as far as your device will go. And then all the way back, check this raw value on the right. As I'm turning the wheel all the way to the end, it should go to a number like that, 65535. That's a raw value. Imagine it as a pixel, or pixels. And then before you click OK here, make sure your physical wheel is dead straight, and then click done. Sometimes it might say 50.1% or 49 or something like that. Don't worry about what the number says here because you're showing iRacing when your physical wheel is straight. And then click done. And then it says turn your wheel 90 degrees. And when you do this, you're obviously looking at your physical wheel being 90 degrees. It should come up around 900. Now, for some reason in iRacing, I think the steering ratio is a little bit sensitive. What I always do is turn the wheel to 850 or 800, or I turn the wheel until it says 800. It's a little over 90 degrees, and what that means is my physical wheel is turned more than 90 degrees, but I'm about to tell iRacing that this is 90 degrees. So you can imagine it's going to slow down my steering rack a little bit. I click done, and that's my wheel done. Check over here, it thinks my map range is now 800 degrees, and it has my wheel range set to that as well. And that's the steering done. Check that your wheel force is set to 25 Newton meters or 20, but in that range. And all that is doing is telling iRacing what your force feedback steering unit is capable of, what your direct drive unit is capable of. This is not an adjustment you make as you use iRacing or you switch from car to car. Just set this one and forget it. Strength is the one you adjust, and you may adjust force feedback every once in a while because when you drive a Mazda Miata, there's a ton of power steering in that car, so the steering on your direct drive unit will feel initially really light. So when you're in the car, you can actually adjust this on the fly, and I'll show you. When you're in the car, you have your black box menu, and you can use your steering buttons. If you haven't calibrated, you should, to graphics adjustments. Scroll down, and FFB strength, which you can turn on the fly, is the same as the number we were just looking at in options, which was, I think, yeah, strength. That adjusts. So you'll adjust your Miata wheel to make it heavier than it ordinarily is in real life or in iRacing, as iRacing is replicating it, because iRacing tries to reproduce all the same forces, for the car that you're in. So your Mazda Miata wheel is going to be really light, and you'll turn that up to make it feel good. Um, Conversely, if you jump in an Indy car, that steering wheel is extremely heavy because there's no power steering, and there's obviously a ton of downforce and all that kind of stuff, and giant tires and caster. So there's a lot of weight in that steering wheel. You'll adjust the strength down for an IndyCar wheel. Um, so that's something you can just adjust when you're on the fly, but wheel force, you don't adjust that. Smoothing, that's very bizarre. If you hover over these options, you can see the black box at the bottom here gives you an idea of what it's for. A lot of these options are quite often so that people with cheaper wheel units can enhance the feel. But realistically, we're using direct drive wheel units, so we don't have any enhancing required. We don't need much filtering or anything like that. iRacing is sending us the fastest frequency steering torque that it can at all times, and it's pretty much like one for one as far as what what car that iRacing is replicating, reproducing, and what we're feeling through our wheel unit. So we don't need many filters, and a lot of times you turn up a lot of filters, you end up just making your steering feel like mud because too much going on. It's not realistic. Anyway, smoothing is something that was introduced recently. I haven't even bothered to read what it is. Um, yeah, it's smoothing out some high frequency noise, which I don't know if that means spikes like hitting curbs and stuff to make your it's smoothing, right? Anyway, you want to turn that to 0. An issue recently, I think, when it was first released, is that they had the default set to like 15% or something crazy. And of course, we don't want that in a direct drive wheel. So anyway, your iRacing wheel, your wheel in iRacing probably started feeling pretty crap maybe 6 months ago. And if you haven't addressed the smoothing and turned it to 0%, you still need to do that. Damping is usually I just put at 1% because what 1% damping can do is remove the only issue that there ever is with force feedback direct drive units is oscillation when you let go of the wheel. And you may have noticed that when you're in a high wheel strength car and you're on a straightaway and you let go of the wheel to pick your nose or something, or pick up a drink or something like that, and the wheel could just suddenly bounce out of your hands. And that's just because there isn't, I guess, physically anything in a direct drive unit to stop it from moving. And when you're on a straightaway, you're still going to hit some bumps, and you've got caster in all these race cars as well. So I guess with direct drive unit, there's nothing stopping it when it hits a bump and there's no one holding the wheel still, that it could bounce in one direction and then maybe it would bounce in the other, and it gets out of control. So damping 1% fixes that a little bit. We don't need anything for minimum force. I don't have time to read that, but that's your steering done. So you're good on that now. Imagine you've still got to calibrate your pedals. That's a little bit more in depth, just because we take advantage of some good software on our on our pedals, particularly the brake. So what you want to do first is open up Huisenfeld Smart Control here, and we need to remove a limit that we have on our brake pedal. Notice in the middle here, this is the brake pedal. The maximum output is set to 95%. So what that means is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to push the blue channel here. The blue progress bar is what I'm doing with my brake pedal, and the green bar is what iRacing is seeing, because I have this 95% limit. If I adjust this on the live to 100, the green bar should meet the blue bar. Oh, and it's not, because there's a big dead zone down here too. See this dead zone here? iRacing doesn't see anything until I get past this dead zone. Anyway, we just need to adjust the max output to 100%, and you can click Save Active Profile to Pedals EEPROM, whatever that means. And we just need to do that because when we calibrate our pedals, we're going to want to see a maximum raw value of 4095. So when I push the gas all the way down, I got to push it all the way down until it says 4095, and then click Done. And then the brake pedal, oh yeah, I'll tell it's a load cell brake pedal. That's a new feature. I'm going to push that all the way to 4095, pretty heavy. Click Done. Make sure that it's set to calibrate to detect clutch. And I'm going to push the clutch all the way down to 4095 and click Done. And then I'm going to go back to the Smart Control program. You'll see it in your taskbar down here to get it back up here. And now I'm going to put back in the I had it at 95% here, but I actually run 80. And what I'm doing here, running 80, 70, yeah, that's fine. What I'm doing here is basically telling iRacing that my brake, as far as iRacing is concerned, will never see more than 80% pressure. Why do you have to do that? Well, if you're in a GT3 car or any car that's got ABS on iRacing, iRacing doesn't do a brilliant job of simulating racing ABS. So in real life, if you race GT4 or GT3 cars, the way to use the brakes is just to mash the brakes, push them right through the ground, and make the Bosch or whatever system ABS work as best as it can. But on iRacing, when you mash the brake pedal all the way down, it just locks up, right? Or it works for a lap, and then 3 laps in, if you're lucky, you have this massive thermal degradation and the car doesn't stop anymore and you don't get to the apex or you spin. iRacing's just not great at that. I don't know why. I guess it's probably a competition thing, right? Because now everyone can just mash their brakes and there's no finesse required anymore. Not sure. Huizenfeld have this smart control software that comes with their pedals if you're using the Ultimates or their I forget what they call their lower spec pedal, but if you've got a speed sim, you have Ultimate pedals, Ultimate Plus, and so we've adjusted this here so that now when we brake max braking, iRacing will be just below where the tires now lock up, and that's about 80%, 70 to 80% in most GT3 cars. They're all a little bit different. I think the Porsche 911 GT3R maybe locks up around 72%. But then I think like the Lambo or the BMW GT3s, you can brake a bit harder, close to 80%. Max force up here is basically how hard you want to have to work, right? I'm not pushing that hard to get to this much brake pressure. But if you're in a race car that requires a lot of brake effort, brake pressure, then it's probably a pretty good training device on your sim to push this up and maybe push it up to 65 or 70 Ks, something crazy, right? And then when you're done, you just click Save Active Pedals, Active Profile to Pedals. I'm a bit lazy and I'm on my sim a lot. I don't want to start walking in circles because I have a bad hip from braking too hard. And that's your pedals done. Important to again go through the steps. When you first have to calibrate your pedals, turn this up to 100%, save it, then calibrate your pedals, make sure it sees all of your pedal inputs, and then come back here and change your max output back down again. Because if you don't remove this output, right, and you show iRacing how far your brake pedal goes, it'll only see the 80% that you're pushing it, and it will think that 80% is 100%, so you won't benefit from having this limit on your output. Gears, easy, obviously, right? Just push that, and it wants you to pull the paddle on your steering wheel for upshifting, and then it wants you to pull the paddle for downshifting, and you're done. No, I don't want to use the H-band shifter. And that's it.